Every project has its own story, and this Porsche 914 is no exception. When we first found it, this car was far from its glory days, rusted, worn and forgotten. But over the course of 3 years and countless weekend hours, we saw the potential to bring it back. The 914 isn't just any car. With its unique design and handling, it was a game changer for its time. It even holds a special place in racing history, becoming the first Formula One safety car in 1973. Restoring it wasn't just about fixing up an old car, it was about reviving a piece of automotive history. Now, we're excited to take you through our complete journey of how we restored this amazing classic car. Welcome to the story of our 914. My dad, brother and me have been working on this 1974 Porsche 914 that was imported from California to Europe. During the COVID pandemic, my dad was scrolling on an online car marketplace and came across the listing of this bright green, rusty Porsche. He immediately showed us the pictures of the car, and at first I didn't even know this model existed. But the fact that it needed some love, the color, the Fuchs wheels, and that most of the original documents came with it convinced us enough to purchase the car. And after that, the restoration of the 914 began. The first thing we did was disassembling almost the complete car so we could take a closer look at it. Next, we took out the engine and gearbox and stripped the engine down. Then we rebuilt it, gave it some paint, and make it look as good as new again. Now it was time to work on the body of the car. There were a lot of hours of removing rust, welding, putty, and sanding involved. We welded in a new front floor pan because previously there was an air conditioning unit which we removed, and we also welded in a new battery tray. After the bodywork was done, we painted the engine bay ourselves with spray cans of primer and 2-component Ravenna green paint. This because our plan was to finish the engine bay so we could drive the car to the paint shop and not taking the engine out again. Then we roughly primed the body ourselves to give us a little bit of an overview and a result of all the welding, puttying and sanding. In the meantime, we repainted the targa roof. After the bodywork, we started working on the underside of the car. We first disassembled all of the suspension parts. Then we removed most of the old paint and coating that was on the underside of the car, and after that we applied new underbody coating. Now that we finished the painting and coating, we were making some serious steps with the project. We got the suspension parts powder coated. Next it was time to reassemble all of the suspension parts. We replaced the brake pads, shock absorbers and the steering mechanism to one of a 911 turbo. Next in line was restoring the Fuchs wheels. They were not in the best looking condition, so we glass bead blasted the wheels first, and then we polished them. And finally, we painted the inner sections black, just like they were before. In our opinion, they turned out really good. To avoid rust in the future, we applied hollow section wax in the sections of the car that we could not reach. This stuff protects hollow spaces in the bodywork of the car against rust. One of the last things before driving the car to the paint shop was to prepare the engine bay before we put the engine back in. We applied new rubbers for the engine in the engine bay, and we stuck a new firewall against the panel on the front side. And now it was time to put back the engine in the car. And we waited for this moment for quite some time. Next came both, I think, the most exciting and nerve-wracking moment. Our first start after more than a year. The car managed to start and it wasn't running that bad. After the successful start, we couldn't resist to give the car a little spin. Now it was time to drive the car to the paint shop. The car was prepped for paint. We were really amazed by the results. As you can see, it was looking really good. Now it was time to reassemble the hood and close it for the first time since we took it apart. Then we drove the car back to our workshop. Sadly, it was pretty rainy that day. Now that the car is back in our shop, it was time to reassemble it completely. The first thing we did was we replaced the fuel lines with stainless steel ones. We didn't want to take any fire risk with the old fuel lines. With installing the new fuel lines, we also decided to install a new fuel pump. We prepared the new fuel tank and then we test fitted it. We installed new horns, took out the pedal box, we cleaned it up and got some new springs and bushings. Then we gave it some paint. And it was time to reassemble it and place it back into the car. Then it was time to fit the wiper motor. And we also got some new rubbers for this. And shortly after that, they were spinning again. At most places we also sealed in the complete wiring harness with some brand new canvas tape. Then it was time to install the headlights and turn signals. And we had to install the mechanism for the pop-up headlights. We also repainted the plastic headlight covers and the motor covers. We screwed the covers back on, and then it was time to fit the so-called headlight eyebrow. In the rear trunk we also resealed the wiring harness with new canvas tape. Next in line were the tail lights. Next were the ventilation and heater. The heat is coming from the heat exchangers at the engine. We custom 3D printed the ventilation grille at the front of the car, as you can see right here. And this was it in place. And so the complete ventilation system was installed. The heat is being pushed all the way from the back of the car to the front side. Next it was time to permanently fit the fuel tank. And now it was time to test drive the car with the new fuel tank. We also installed a windshield washer motor, which was not previously used. Originally this was done using pressure of the spare tire. Then it was time to cut some vinyl and stick it to the sides and the top of the Targa roof bar. We had to sand down the surface for better adhesion, and we used spray adhesive to stick it in place. It was quite some work, but yeah, the results are there. Next we began to stick all the new weather seal rubbers to the car. We tried our best to fit them as good as possible. Now we were able to close the hood for the first time how it's supposed to. And also very important, we reinstalled the original Porsche badge that came from the car. Then we started to work on the dashboard. We purchased an overlay which could be used on top of the original dashboard. So we applied a lot of glue, and then we stuck the new overlay over the old dashboard. We had to clamp the dashboard down and let it dry for a few days. Between the windshield and the dashboard was this vinyl that had to be fitted. We weren't really happy the way the inside of the car looked, even though it would be later covered in carpets. So we decided to remove as much rust as we could, and then we repainted the inside. As you can see, it looks much better. Then we refitted the rear windshield. Then we started to fit some interior pieces, starting with the seat belts. Then the panel that's behind the seats. And the button to open the engine lid. And the interior light. Then we gave the leather interior trims a new layer of fresh paint, which made them look a lot better. On the back side we installed the Targa roof bar, and on the front side we installed the new rubber. We reused the original chrome trims. Next in line were the doors. This was a lot of work because we didn't want to damage any paint, and also we had to get the gaps right. So this took a lot of time. But eventually we got it done. Doors also need windows, so that was the next thing we installed. The 914 was really starting to come together now. Obviously it was necessary to install some more weather seals, and after that we installed the complete new carpet set. We applied glue to the surface and then stuck it all down. Then we refitted the shift knob, and this was the final result. Before installing the seats, we applied some vinyl on the inside of the Targa roof. We chose this diamond-like pattern, which we really liked. Now that was done, we were able to refit the seat rails. Finally, the first seat. After this, we also installed the other one as well. We purchased this original Blaupunkt Frankfurt radio. In combination with a telescopic antenna. Just look at how amazing this looks. We bought a new set of speakers, but sadly they didn't fit right away, so we had to 3D print these brackets. This way we were able to mount them in the original plastic covers. The old glove box was falling apart, so we used some polyester to strengthen it. Next we installed the rear trunk on his hinges. We prepped the windshield. We installed these tiny little plastic spacers, one by one. Then the adhesive was applied. And finally the windshield was back in its place. We repainted the front and rear lip, as well as the side skirts. We got ourselves brand new chrome bumpers, which are made out of stainless steel. First, we carefully installed the front bumper. And then, as you might guess, the rear one. These rubber top strips were filled with rust because there was a metal strip in it. So what we did is we cut them open, removed basically all the metal that was left over, removed most of the rust, and we filled them with flexible epoxy. This way we prevented it from rusting any further. It was quite a job, but looking a lot better in our opinion. After all of that, we stuck them to the chrome bumpers. Now the 914 was basically almost done. So we roughly aligned the car ourselves so we could take the car for a proper test drive. After the successful test drive, we put the engine lid back on. Look how beautiful this turned out. And then we put on the side skirts, the brand new chrome windshield wipers, and the side mirror. The very last step before we could have the car inspected was to install the door cards. And that was the car basically done. We got a temporary license plate. This way we could drive the car to the inspection center. Here the car was inspected so it could be registered and get a license plate. But first, of course, we had to drive the car there. After a successful inspection, we drove the car back to our workshop. After all of this, there was one last thing that we wanted to replace, and that was the exhaust. So we replaced it with a Dansk exhaust, which was looking a lot better. And that was it. After 3 years of hard work, the project is done.